One of the things that I say with regards to crisis communications is that if you find yourself in a crisis, your number one job is not to make the situation worse. Well, how can you make it worse? You can make it worse by what you say. You can make it worse by what you do. And that's why I was so surprised. I've been following what's happening with Uncle Nearest for a few weeks now because I was so enamored by Fawn Weaver and also by the company's origin story. It was just really fascinating to me. So I've been following the litigation for a while, and I will tell you that I've been really surprised with some of the comments that I've seen on Fawn's page, or some of the posts that I've seen on her page, but also some of um, the comments that I've heard about that has been posted on media outlets page. So in addition to not wanting to make a crisis worse, I think one of the worst things that you can do is to comment in the immediate aftermath of something that is devastating to you. So when you launch a company, the average person, you want that company to do well. You put a lot of time in it. You put a lot of effort. It's the thing that you think about when you wake up and the thing that you think about when you go to bed. It is important to you. So when you navigate ups and downs, it's really easy to take it personally. It's also really easy to be upset if you feel like your story is not coming across clearly. For these reasons, it's very, very important that we step away. Like we say what needs to be said at the beginning and then we step away because we're just so close to it and we're so wrapped up into what happened. Anyone could say the wrong thing or anyone could say the right thing at the wrong time. And so I'm making this video because, Black Enterprise did a story, has done a couple stories on the Uncle Nearest litigation with Farm Credit. And they had a story that came out last week, and it basically said, is Uncle Nearest heading to bankruptcy? A reasonable question. And then someone using the Uncle Nearest account made comments and basically said, do better. I mean, that was the gist of what they were saying is like these comments or these kind of stories. It's clickbait, it's harmful, it's what you would expect from TMZ, and they harm us. And when I saw that, I thought, man, of all the things that you could be worried about, jumping in the comments to respond directly, like that's the strategy. It just didn't make sense because the headline and the article itself was rather tame. I mean, you could tell that Black Enterprise is not trying to go after Uncle Nearest. I think that their story was very fair and it was very short. So I'm like, of all the things that you could talk about, this is the one that you're jumping on. And the headline was in fact reasonable. And here's why. For those who haven't been covering this or who have been, maybe dipped in and dipped out, Uncle Nearest was sued by Farm Credit Mid-America for allegedly defaulting on over $100 million in loans. That is a lot of money. I have no idea how any company could come back from that. The company has also been placed in receivership, and a receiver was appointed a few weeks ago. That receiver is now putting in place his team. And one of the entities that the receiver hired specializes in restructuring and bankruptcy. So the headline, is Uncle Nearest heading towards receivership, was quite reasonable. Nothing salacious about it. I think that again, jumping in the comments is not good because what you want when you're in a crisis is you want the story, you want to give yourself some distance so that when you comment, you're commenting from a place of control. But when you jump in there, it's like it raises more questions than it answers. And everything that you say, people are not going to be able to hear you because they're probably wondering, why are you doing this? I also scrolled over to Fawn Weaver's Instagram page, and she made a post, and in the post, she was telling Black media to do better. What I want to say about that is the job of Black media and media in general is to serve the public interest, to tell the public what they should know, and to help contextualize and make sense of what's happening in the world around them. It is not to serve the interest of people who they may personally like. They may personally be interested in. That's not the job of media. The media is to serve the public interest. And if they're not doing that, if they're idolizing celebrities and influencers and entrepreneurs, then they're not doing what they're called to do. And while that is the job of media in general, I think that Black media has a higher fiduciary responsibility, and they should be telling the truth about as they see it or reporting the stories. I think the other thing, to just be quite candid, is there's so much information out there about the Uncle Nearest brand, so much information. There have been countless podcast episodes on it from people with platforms much larger than mine, a number of articles that have been written by the local paper as well as national outlets, because the company is important, right, to our culture. And so people are curious. So a number of articles from local and national publications. There's also been other lawsuits, and those lawsuits have received some, not a lot of coverage. You know, a couple creditors received judgment. One was for around $84,000. Another one for their for a company called Bills Up in Oregon. That judgment was around $61,000. So there have been other lawsuits. And that just adds to the curiosity and the questions that people have about this brand. So when you have all that out there, of course, people are going to write about it. Of course, they're going to try to connect the dots and put things together. It's true that a lot of companies in general, and especially companies who are in the whiskey business, are facing difficulties. So Uncle Nearest, you know, what they're going through, they're not an anomaly from the standpoint of maybe slumping sales, if you can say that. But not as many companies have lawsuits that are public like this. And so I think that's the distinction. I don't think that anyone is out to get Uncle Nearest. And I say that from my vantage point. I actually don't know um, don't know any of the players there, but just looking at it and trying to have a clear-eyed assessment, just seems like people want their money, and that's reasonable. But again, as I was saying at the start, you know, when you're in a crisis, whether you're an individual, whether you're a brand, you cannot make it worse. You don't want to do any harm. You don't want to further complicate things. You don't want to make it worse by what you say. You don't want to make it worse by what you're posting. And it's not a bad idea to take a break from social media and just go inward and to figure out what your next steps are, to figure out what you want people to take away or what you're taking away. It's not a bad idea at all. Because if you post in the midst of something that has to be very difficult, I don't care how you try to sell it, this has to be very difficult. And if you comment and you don't give yourself the distance, you may say something today that looking back a year from now, you would not have said. And so the distance is never bad. For me, this also underscores why it's so important for the PR teams and the legal teams to be in alignment. You know, years ago, I worked for a civil rights entity with a lot of lawyers, and I was on the the communication side. And there were times when I might want, you know, one of our lawyers to say X, Y, and Z, and they would say, "Listen, we can't say this. If this case goes to court, everything that we say is a part of the record." And we don't want to anger the court before we get there. We don't want to get there and they're looking at us, you know, with questions or with contempt or with anger. And so what you say when you're in a crisis and what you say when you're involved in litigation, doesn't matter if you're saying it on email or saying it on a social media post, it is a part of the record and it can harm you. And it's very, very important, you know, from a PR side, PR people look at how do we maintain your relationship with various publics? How do we do that? And how do we communicate in a way that increases interest and increases support, not alienates, you know, the people who should be supporting you? The legal side is thinking about a different set of matters. And so because you have different emphasis and different spheres of influence, they have to both be talking. And the person who's involved in the litigation, they have to be listening to both sides and just say, listen, I may not understand, but I'm going to do what you all are advising me to do. So these are my thoughts and my takeaways, and I'm curious if you've been watching this. Again, I know a lot of people have. Curious to know what you think. I really don't see this issue as people who are wrongfully going after this very esteemed company that has enjoyed so much press and so much goodwill. I just think that it's an unfortunate situation and people are curious. What I will say is the more you comment, the more that you do things that have the appearance of scolding people who would otherwise be your supporters, it raises curiosity and people are going to start digging. There's a whole Reddit thread, probably a couple Reddit threads about this company. There is also a blogger. I think the blog is Bourbon and Rye, and this person has allegedly heard from some employees, right? And he is covering this. And so the more you say things that don't seem to pass, you just increase curiosity and you make people want to go out and dig and find more information. And when that happens, it's probably not going to bode well for you or your company or your brand. So be very careful when you're in a crisis what you say. And remember that for this situation in particular, we really haven't heard much from employees. If they start to get agitated and if they start to feel like the representations that Fawn Weaver and the company is making is not in alignment with their experience, they're going to start talking, assuming they aren't bound by a non-disclosure agreement. But they're going to start talking. So, yeah, I just think that this is something that is really unfortunate and something that is obviously a learning lesson from all of us or for all of us because no one is exempt from making a mistake, especially for something that you care so much about. And you feel like it's slipping away or you feel like people aren't talking about it in the way that you would like. Again, curious to hear your comments. Feel free to drop in the comment and let me know what you think. Let me know how this is resonating with you. Thanks for listening and thanks for watching. And if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe.